don't already. The Quls, the Ayatul Kursi, these two verses, Surah Baqarah, are part of what we're supposed to be reciting before we go to bed. But build a relationship with these two verses. Look at how and where it came from, right? And now we get also in this, a decade plus into the prophetic mission, the mandate of 5 daily prayers. This is happening prior to Medina, not after the fact, right? You were essentially made for 50 and it was reduced to 5. What I'd like for you to do, just because I was talking a lot and I don't know how much was retained, but some of you are likely familiar with this part of the story, right? What are some of the things that we can take from this? Like Musa alayhi salam telling the Prophet that his community was weak. Where are they weak? Like, what are they weak in? Do you know? And that your community is even weaker, he says, right? In their hearts, in their hearing, in their bodies, in their seeing. Do you see? What does this mean? And how is that related to our prayer? Do you know? What does it mean that the Prophet said, I'm too shy to go back and dwindle it down even more? Or that Allah tells us that you're going to do 5, but it'll be written as 50. Like, you want to reflect and think about some of these things. And then there's going to be like 2 other things we're going to talk about quickly, and then we'll wrap up with Al-Isra wal Mi'raj. But what are some of the things you're taking away from this part of the journey around the prayers in particular? Then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead.
Like, I just think about it, like, sometimes, like, for me, in my past daily prayers, like, there were sometimes where it was hard, like, there were different aspects of it that was hard, maybe, like, I pushed Isha, and it was, like, right before midnight, and I wanted to sleep, or, like, I'm really tired, or, maybe it came from the gym, and, my body's, working out, or maybe you've just been, like, going through a lot, and you feel like it's right, and it's like, just the action of actually praying is really hard. And yeah, especially like especially when you said society, right? Or like you want to party. It's like there's a lot of it's like that's the fun of it. What about type of like we see people who like that kind of stuff. That's I don't I don't know about this one. I mean, I don't know. They're like I don't know. It's like it happens. I don't know. To your point, Yeah, nah. I've been like one or two. I'd be like GG.
Okay, what are some of the things we're taking away? Oh my god, I got so many boogers in my nose. It's crazy. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, one thing, just like outwardly, we were talking about we're a lot physically smaller than people were back in the day. I think actually, I don't know if that's true, so maybe I won't say that. Let's just discuss that. The other thing is like we live in the day, an age of like TikTok, instant gratification, so much like other things want our time and attention. And then the last thing I think is like also capitalism, the industrial revolution, all of that has really changed what day to day might have looked like. And so that probably impacts why we are weaker than the folks before us.
Yeah, and what is it making us weaker in?
Our mind.
Okay.
attention span.
Yeah, potentially, right? Like our iman. What was the second thing you said?
Attention span.
Attention span. Yeah, 100%, right? Other thoughts? What else did we discuss? Yeah.
I find it interesting, like how it demonstrates how much the Prophet like truly cared for the Ummah, because he goes back like 9 times every time that heard the advice from Musa alayhi salam to get salah reduced, and I'd imagine after like the second or third time, I'm too shy, but he's able to do that over and over again until almost like the 10th piece of advice. That's him, like I'm not too shy.
Yeah. And what else does it tell you in that scenario? Yeah.
I think the Prophet just like loves his people so much that he wants to like ease the burden on them to like practice godly knowledge, and he's happy to like take on the responsibility because he's like thinking ahead for us.
Who's he asking this reduction of these multiple times? Allah. How does Allah respond to him? Huh?
He affirms that he's like,
Yeah, but he's not like, go away. We already talked. Like, why are you talking to me again? Do you know? Allah wants you to make dua to him, right? وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ وَدِعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. This is like Quran, right? Make dua to me, I will respond to you, right? And the Prophet, in a matter of whatever sense of like relativeness time is functioning where he's at, but let's just assume time in the frame of time we're in. Do you know? Like, how many times does he go back and do this in a short window of time? But he's just going back again and again and talking to Allah. Do you know? Right? You make dua to Allah one time in the year. Do you know what I mean? You make it in like constrained states when you're at your wits' end. Do you know? Like, he spent however much time already in conversation with the divine prior to this moment. He knows who he's speaking to. Do you see? And that's like an important part of a discussion. Like, if you don't know who the person is, how can you build trust and tawakkul on someone that you fundamentally have an unfamiliarity around? Do you know? But there's two like that go into a conversation. And so, as remarkable as it is that he keeps going back, for whose sake? Like, it's Musa alayhi salam's, what's he saying? He's like, your community, they're not gonna get it done. Do you know? Like, no way. My people couldn't get it, and your people, they're even worse than mine. Do you know what I mean? And the Prophet, he's going to get it done for us. Like, can you imagine if you had to pray 50 times in a day? What would you do? Do you know? Right? We went for Umrah, and our entire day revolved around just going to the masjid and getting tired praying 5 times a day. What if you had to, in Mecca and Medina, pray 50 times a day? What would you fundamentally do? Wouldn't be as fun as it was, right? Do you know? But Allah also hears every single time the Prophet out, and he grants him. And when there's love, there's sincerity, right? The focused heart and the attentive heart makes dua differently than the distracted heart. And the attentive nature of the heart comes from knowing like why you're doing what you're doing and who are you doing it for fundamentally. Do you know? So how did he get to ask Allah and Allah granted him versus I make dua, like why is my dua not being answered? It's like a product sometime of what I'm bringing to the conversation. Do you see what I mean? Prayer is really important in our religion. And at whatever level, you got to understand all Muslims have 5 prayers in the day. There's disagreements and different opinions on when these prayer times start and end within even like schools of thought. Like in the Hanafi school, there's 2 opinions on the start time of Asr, not just one. You know, Abu Hanifa had an opinion. His students, Abu Yusuf and uh, Imam Muhammad, they had another opinion, right? So it's not just like Hanafi versus Shafi, like a person who's Salafi versus someone who's a Madhabi, or like Sunni versus Shia. But even within schools, they have different opinions. But nobody says there isn't 5. You got to do 5. And if you're not doing 5, you're not doing right by yourself. If you struggle with it, it's a struggle. You try your best. You got to do 1 before you could do 2. And you build yourself up in a place where you build a relationship with it. Ramadan is coming. And if you know that you have distinct relationships with this fundamental thing that was given to us from Allah to the Prophet directly in this moment, you got to go back to building that like dynamic again. And it's different, right? Like some of us are in different stages of life than others. It's a lot easier to do something when everybody around you is also doing it. It's hard when you're alone and no one around you understands you, let alone gives you room to be yourself. But the mode of understanding like the value of this thing and its importance. Do you want to be evidence of the creation that was built for 50 and 5 is being written as 50? Or do you want to be evidence of your people are going to be too weak? They're not going to get it done. And you're juxtaposing a population that ultimately was in the habit of killing their prophets versus our community is meant to be in a place where we honor and dignify our prophets, you know? So, whose characteristics are you going to embody? And here, you want to, like as best as you can, get it done. The companions, they always thought about things through the frame of salah. The Prophet is emotionally aware and intelligent. So when he sees something's on their minds, he asks them. He comes to them and they're in a state of clear, like, you know, anxiety. And the Prophet says, "What's going on with you?" And they say, like, you talk about Dajjal, like in so many different ways, right? And they're worried about the Dajjal. Dajjal is a antichrist figure that comes in the apocalyptic kind of genres of our tradition. He, you know, at the end of times battles against the Mahdi and Isa alayhi salam. There's many descriptions that are given of him, and when the prophet is responding to their anxiety and gives like an understanding more so in detail, and he says amongst the descriptions, Dajjal is going to have a day that's like our day, a day that's like a week, a one that's like a month, one that's like a year. You know, is going to like kind of impact in that way of time existence a little bit differently. And they're like going through all of this. At the end of all of it, the first thing that they ask him is like, Messenger of God, on that day that's like a week and a month, like a year, how do we pray on that day? Like everything is going back to their salah. It's an oasis, it's an anchor, it's an actual like commune with the divine. Do you know? How can you benefit from Fajr if you sleep through Fajr? Do you know what I mean? But you got to go at a pace that makes sense for you. When I was in my early teens, I didn't have any sense of relationship to my prayer. My family prayed like individually. They taught us how to pray. My brother went to undergrad first, my older brother. My sister went. My brother went to undergrad. I was 12. He came back. He experienced like a religious transformation. Mashallah. He encouraged us to start praying together. But I didn't really know like what was going on. I'm 12 years old. And as things start to transition, I would like sometimes like just not pray. I would say I prayed when I hadn't. If they called me out on it, I'd roll out of bed and without wudu and make up and down. When I got to the latter part of my high school, I started to cut class a lot. I would cut class and I'd go to the masjid. And I'd forgotten how to pray. I didn't know the difference between sunnahs and fard. And I was too intimidated to ask people. I either assumed they were going to judge me, and some of them would have, but I know a lot of them even today. And many of them were just really nice. It was my own anxieties. But as I built a relationship with it, like I'm not going to hate the person I was at that point as a necessary variable. Because I was Muslim at that point, I'm still responsible for the prayers at, that I didn't pray. Do you see? So if you've missed some, you got to make them up. And you want to estimate as best as you can. So if you missed like years of prayers, instead of praying your sunnah prayers, like pray a makeup prayer with every prayer. At least you're trying towards it, you know? And if you miss like 3 years or just estimate it, after 3 years, you'll be caught up. You see what I mean? It's, the term is called sahib at-tartib. Like you have fulfilled all of your prayers, right? Uh, there's like a well-known figure in Islamic history. His name is Tipu Sultan. And Tipu Sultan, when they stand to pray Asr, in some opinions, there's 4 sunnahs before you pray Asr, like the 4 fard of Asr. And when they're trying to decide who's going to pray and lead the prayer for Asr, he says, um, whoever has never missed the sunnahs for Asr, they should step forward and lead the prayer. And nobody stepped forward, whether out of like humility or they just didn't do it. But Tipu Sultan, he then steps forward and says, regretfully, like, I got to lead this because I'm the only one who's never missed these sunnahs. Do you know? We are a people of prayer, just like we're a knowledge based civilization, right? And if you're leaving behind your salah, you got to really ask, like, why? If there's dire situations where you have to, like, know fiqh in how you do it, but most of us are not performing brain surgery. Some of you might be, do you know? But that's a particular specific on a day. Do you see? And it applies in other ways, right? Like I'm saying it to you because you all are choosing to sit here on a Wednesday night where you could be anywhere else. A lot of people have reached out to me in the last few days. They're like, my mom told me I shouldn't fast because I have an important exam like a week into Ramadan, right? My dad doesn't want me to fast because I gotta like, this important job interview, right? Those aren't valid reasons to not fast. They're not like legally excusable reasons. Do you know? There are reasons where there can be exemptions, but you're going to get out of this thing what you put into it. So if you want to have the yield that comes from the consistency of the exercise, you got to do the exercises in the way that it's done. The first thing we're asked about on the day of judgment will be the state of our salah. May Allah make it easy for us. And it's not about anything other than just objective fact, right? When you have facts, there's not opinions to them. They're facts. Like I can't have an opinion on a fact, right? I'm sitting down. You can't say to me, you're standing. I'm not standing. I'm sitting, right? So the questions that you're going to be asked are given to you. It's not like so that you're surprised by it. It literally says the first thing you're going to be asked about is your prayer. If it's good, everything that comes after will be good. If it's not, everything after is not. Like it's all rooted in this thing. You still have a God who, when the angels come, the Hadith Qudsi says, and they go and look at the state of the prayer, and there's gaps in the prayer. Allah then says, go back and see if they did anything extra, right? Any sunnahs, any nawafil. Our God is so merciful that even when you don't do like the 2 rakahs at Fajr that take 2 minutes to perform, He's telling his angels, just see if there's anything that can fill the gaps. He's looking for a reason to accept. Do you see what I mean? But don't take it for granted. Do you know? And you do it at a pace that makes sense for you. We get a lot of people who come through these doors, they don't have a relationship to it, they struggle with it. The ajr is in the struggle. Pray one and be consistent with it. Add on a second. Be kind to each other in how you talk and uplift. And you will gradually build that relationship in it. And then as an exercise, like the sunnahs and the nafil are where like love gets inculcated. The love that we want to have, because love is what yields like courage and strength. So the Quran says, Ala inna awliya Allahi la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun. That indeed the close friends of Allah, la khawfun alayhim, there's no fear upon them, wa la hum yahzanun, and they're not amongst those who sorrow, right? In the Hadith Qudsi, the Prophet talks about the awliya of Allah, and he says in the beginning part of the Hadith that, like, the people who have enmity towards the friends of Allah, like Allah is gonna like go to battle with them. Do you know? And then the rest of the Hadith talks about uh, parts inclusive of like the performance of like extra things, not just the bare minimum. And he says these are what yield like love, because we don't have to do it; you just want to do it. You know. And then it's increasing like a much needed variable. Do you see what I mean? And you start at a place that makes sense. This is like the basis of where the 5 daily come in, and they're mandated. And from this point, it's just going to get done. It's established, and every generation of Islam that comes after, like 5 daily prayers are going to happen with them. The other thing I'm going to say here is like, you want to also be smart, right? Like, being able to know how to do something doesn't mean you know how to teach somebody how to do something. Do you know? So we get like lots of shahadas in our community. May Allah make it easy for all of us, including our sisters and brothers who are new to this religion. It's not meant to be a hyper legalized like religion, but you learn what you need to know. And the prayer itself is not just about the performance of ritual, it's a spiritual exercise. You want to really learn about prayer, the verses that talk about it, what its goals and objectives are, and why like the mechanics are important to follow, because they're defined as divinely prescribed practice to create that like inner kind of ascension and that strength and protecting us from things that are not good for us, etc. Do you know? From a fixed standpoint, you have a bucket that is obligatory, you have a bucket that is necessary, you have a bucket that's recommended. Somebody comes in and they convert right now, they have to pray like the prayers that come in the time frames. Do you know what I mean? But what if they didn't even know we had 5 daily prayers? They have a legally excusable reason to only do what's obligatory. And if you're teaching somebody, you got to make sure you know like what you're teaching. Because if you teach them the final form, that is every part to the prayer as what they have to do from day one, they're going to be super overwhelmed. While they're going through the motions, right? Step number 1, if you're new to this, you want to just honor the timings, the windows of the prayer, right? It's called hurm al-waqt. There's a sanctity to the time. I don't know why we pray Fajr at the time we do. That's like Allah's wisdom. He determined that. He knows what's best. So we pray in those times. And for people who are new to it, which might include some of you, you don't know how to pray. You don't know like the Arabic to recite, right? We can teach you these things. And in the obligatory bucket, there's very little Arabic that has to be recited to fulfill the obligations. You basically go through the postures, and then in the standing, you have to only say the shortest verse of the Quran in Arabic. In the Hanafi school of thought, which is in Surah Al-Yusuf, it says thumma nadir, and then he looked. It doesn't even require reciting Surah Fatiha or like the adhkar and the bowing, the prostrating, the kneeling, because that person takes their shahada, they got to pray Isha. How are they going to memorize Surah Fatiha all of a sudden? Do you see what I mean? Right? And so you want to like get to an understanding of like knowing how to do it doesn't mean that I know how to teach how to do it. And how was I taught how to do it to begin with? Was I taught like fard and haram before I taught or was taught who I'm praying to? Was I taught to pray my sunnah prayers before I was taught whose sunnahs I'm following? You know, in this Ramadan, like amongst the things, we all have like areas that we can increase, build a deeper relationship with your salah, and allow for it to have consistency. You're going to see a qualitative difference then in other things that are going on. Does that make sense? Okay. Just two other things really quick before we wrap up. Um, the Prophet did not pass a throng of angels except they said to him, "You must practice cupping. Alayka bil hijama," right? Hijama is a practice. Like some of you, has anybody ever done cupping before? Yeah. The two of you have done it, and you're sitting next to each other. Whoa, what a coincidence. How did it go for you? Did you do dry cupping or wet cupping? Yeah. Did you see the blood like coagulated and stuff? What was it like after?
What was the experience?
Yeah, how was it?
It was. I went just to try it because it was sunnah, and I had zero expectations, so I didn't know what was going to happen, and I suddenly could breathe better while it was happening, and it was just amazing to breathe deeply. And every time I've gone back, I've always noticed immediate effects that last a little bit. Um, would not recommend doing it on your face because it leaves really big marks that you have to go to, and also don't do that at least at a wedding. But
All right.
it was a really good experience, and I actually go every 2 months.
How about for you?
For me, I did it for medical reasons. All of like the muscles in my back were really messed up. I had like nerves out of both hands, like messed up. Um, and I wasn't finding answers in Western medicine. Like I tried PT, I went to like 6 different orthopedists, like I did literally everything. And then within 1 month of doing it, I got back a really huge portion of like my hand movement. Then I also functioned my hands. It was like life changing. It was like it cured so much stuff that was going on in my body.
MashaAllah.
And to this day, I'm like, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't find out about hijama, or if we didn't find like a woman who does it. Because like there was no one that could help me, like no doctors.
And these are prophetic practices, right? Like you want to deepen the sunnah. It's an entire way of existence. You go for cupping. You can do this in Brooklyn. There's people in our community who do hijama. People will come to your house. Essentially, what they'll do is parts of your body are kind of linked to different outcomes. Like you have allergy issues, you have back pain, you have this, you have that. And they'll take a little blade and just kind of um, nick multiple parts of the area where they're going to put the cup. And then the cup suctions kind of old blood out of that area. And when it comes out, it's like very thick and coagulated. And what it's doing now is bringing new blood into that space. There's a lot of hadith that like tell us things like, indeed, shaitan like runs through the body of Adam, like as like the blood runs through his body. You know what I mean? Right? And you're creating now different pathways of different things to move within you and circulate. Um, when we used to go for Umrah, we would take people in Medina to do cupping. The place that we would go is closed down now, but there's other places that have opened. There are places that are here. You could try it if you're not like so keen about kind of blood letting out of your body. You can also do a cupping where they don't take the blood out and they still put like the cups on, and it actually looks even more interesting because like your skin just suctions in and fills the cup. um, and there's still like benefits to it. But this is something like the angels are telling the prophet here. Um, As the Prophet was descending, he asked Jibreel, "Why did I not see any of the people of heaven except they welcomed me and smiled at me, except one? I greeted him and he greeted me back and welcomed me, but he did not smile at me." He replied, "That was Malik, the custodian of the fire. He never smiles once since the day he was created. If he had ever smiled for anyone, it would have been for you." When the Prophet reached the nearest heaven, so just think about this, right? Like everybody's smiling. The Prophet has just gone through what he's gone through, and he's trying to figure out what's wrong with this person that he's not smiling. Do you know? Like concern, consideration. Do you know what I mean? Um, When the Prophet reached the nearest heaven, he looked down. He saw a dense cloud of smoke filled with din. He asked, "What is this, O Jibrail?" He replied, "These are the devils that swarm over the eyes of human beings, so that they will not think about the dominion of the heavens and the earth, or else they would have seen wonders," right? Like there's shayateen that are just purposely there to have you be in a place where you're not reflective and contemplating on things like the world around you, the majesty of it. Do you know? Think about like how much you stare down and look at your phone, and you're not looking up at the sky. You're not looking at like just how magnificent like the sunrises are and the sunsets are. Do you know what I mean? Right? We're gonna stop in like 3 minutes. Okay. Then he mounted the Burak again and departed. He passed by a caravan of the Quraysh in such and such a place. And then he passed by another. Uh, so basically, he's now back. When morning came, he remained alone, and knowing the people would belie him, he sat despondently. The enemy of Allah, Abu Jahl, was passing by, and he approached and sat down next to him, saying in the way of mockery, "Has anything happened?" The Prophet replied, "Yes." Abu Jahl said, "And what is that?" The Prophet replied, "I was enraptured last night." Abu Jahl said, "To where?" And the Prophet replied, "To the hallowed house." Abu Jahl said, "Then you woke up here amongst us?" He replied, "Yes." Basically, what happens, to go through the rest of this so we can pause and pray, right, is the Prophet's got to now tell people that he went through this thing. Do you know? And the mushrikeen, they start to like mock him and make fun of him and ridicule him. Some people who are Muslim, like they come to and they say, "Do you know what your Prophet wants us to believe? He wants us to believe he went from Mecca to Jerusalem into the heavens all in one like day, one night." And some people start to get doubts. They tell Abu Bakr, and Abu Bakr, when they say, like, "Do you know what your friend wants us to believe?" He says without hesitation in response, "If my friend said it, it must be true." Do you know? And then he goes and sits where the Prophet is telling people, and he just says every so often, "Sadaq, sadaq, sadaq." He's spoken the truth. He's spoken the truth. He's spoken the truth. Do you see? Right? What I want you to think about, and when we meet again in a month, we can maybe talk about it a little bit. One, like people believed the Prophet still. Do you know? And it's a hallmark variable to our identity. As Muslims, we're supposed to be trustworthy people. Do you see what I'm saying? The conundrum that comes up is not that they think he's a liar. They just have to wrap their heads around the realm of possibility as it relates to plausibility. Do you get what I'm saying so far? But he could literally go from Mecca to Jerusalem into the heavens and come back, and people still thought he was telling the truth, right? Why does nobody believe us? You know? And it's not a religion that's just about the perfection of precisions of postures and prayers, but it's about like perfecting good character. It's about how you treat people. It's about how you relate to the world around you. Do you know what I mean? The Prophet was a trusted human being. And somebody might like use the opportunity to mock him. It's showing what's in their heart. But people still like believed what he said. How is it that they believe what he is saying? And what's the transition for us? And you can't say, like, well, we deal with supremacist systems. This kind of nonsense has existed from day one. They're taking people who believe in Islam, women in this early part, they're putting them in hot iron bodies of armor and leaving them under the Arabian sun so the sun scorches and melts their bodies. This is what they're doing to these people. We spent like 2 or 3 weeks talking about how they purposely strategize to distort and mock and spread propaganda. It's all the same nonsense. Do you know? He's not letting go of his ethics. He's not letting go of his values. When you live in a world where upward mobility in the political sphere, the corporate sphere, how it attaches itself to your kind of job elevation is not through decision making on ethics, but a willingness to compromise on ethics. Once somebody knows that they can get you to betray a sense of ethics, they're also going to then be able to deny that you're a trustworthy human being. When they come and ask the Prophet about like a state of Iman and where can somebody be if they commit this sin or that sin, and the Prophet gives room for certain things, and then they say, what about somebody who lies? He's like, no, like you cannot lie and have Iman in your heart. Do you know? And he goes and he flies into the heavens as he's made a journey that takes months that he does overnight, and like people still believe him. Come on, man. At some point, you got to get to a place that says, I have to wean my being off of my nafs that has existed in a childlike state, even though I'm in an adult body at this point. And I got to stop playing games with my heart and understand like just basic fundamental stuff. And why the world does not want Muslims who actually practice Islam in this way. So you had Muslims who were people of integrity and honesty and good character. Do you know? And our communities can historically learn a lot from our Salaf in this country. If you're a Muslim in America, regardless of what your country of origin is, you're in America, right? And Black people are your Salaf here. February 21st is the martyrdom of Malcolm X, rahimahullah. These people had a discipline, a sense of self-discipline, and a sense of community that you can learn a lot of different things from. And their theology informs that practice. They get to a place where etiquette, dignity, how you dress, like the way you present yourself, all of these things are packaged as part of religion. All of it goes into how you relate to the divine. You understand? Nobody mess with those Muslims. You think about for yourself, right? Like where you still have husn al-dhan, you give the benefit of the doubt, but it's not even a struggle. I'm just gonna like have my livelihood from haram. I'm gonna sell haram. I'm gonna speak haram. I'm gonna mistreat people. Do you know? I don't even care if people know that I'm the guy that leaves women high and dry. I don't even care if people know that I'm a person who's known for gossiping and backbiting. I love you. Why would you want to be known for that? You should care if that's where your actions and behaviors are taking you, but it's a deep movement away from a Sadiq al-Amin, the trustworthy, honest one who is the prophet that we claim to follow. Nobody could doubt this. Even when he flew into the heavens and came back down and told people, people believed him. The other part you want to think about, nobody can believe the things you don't tell them. And if you see your Islam as a liability and not as an asset, you're going to always hold back. And then you're just going to give people like a basic reductive understanding of religion. We have an immense opportunity because one of the things that has been well integrated, not assimilated, is that most people, especially in New York, know that Ramadan exists, right? And they treat you differently, some of them, not everybody. Allah make it easy. It's hard to be in hostile environments. But then you have opportunity to get to a place strategically where you don't hold back and you set parameters and precedents that are not just about you, but for those who come after you, later than you, right? I don't get angry a lot at different things. I don't know if any of you ever seen me angry and like yelling. It's not a pretty sight. But it really bothers me, for example, where like we had students at this school who struggled to get policies put in place so that students didn't have to miss Jummah when they take pre-med exams. They literally will set up an entirely different classroom for people to take their exams. And then there's kids who still don't do it. It's like, why? What is it really doing for you to not do it? But if you think about things from an egocentric standpoint, and you're not thinking that maybe a generation after another Muslim is going to work at this company, and the precedent I leave will make it harder for them to pray their prayers. It'll make it harder for them to go and perform Jummah. And that's why what we were talking about before is important. You cannot guide a people you don't love. The Prophet goes into places that he ventures that are unfamiliar and hard and difficult. He goes with a love for people, and selflessness gives you a different energy than selfishness does. And optimization for the self in the immediate is never beneficial for the collective nor the self in the long term. It's going to catch up to you. And so we can't have people understand things that we don't share with them or tell them. And he's got to have the confidence in himself and what it is that he's committed himself to, that he knows that this isn't a part of himself that he needs to hide. That's why, like, we in this room who are here on a random Wednesday night have to realize that a week from now, like, probably 30 or 40 times the number of people that are in this room will be in this building because of Ramadan. A lot of them are scared, and a lot of them are afraid, and they're intimidated, and they don't know how to function. You got to do your part to give them an assurance that they're not in this thing alone. So that when you can stand in a certain place, you know you have an entire community that stands behind you. You know that there's people that have your back, even if they're not physically there. You don't have to water down or dilute. You don't have to claim you know everything. But it's different to say, I don't know, versus saying, I have to hide this part of myself. He doesn't come down and say, people are going to think I'm crazy. People are going to think I'm nuts. How can I explain? I flew on a winged horse and met all of these people. He tells them what it was. That kind of confidence has to be rooted in a humility that also comes from a place of courage that doesn't have you be self-loathing or internalize racisms that white systems rooted in anti-blackness are purposely built to get you to see yourself in that way. Do you see? And the only way the Prophet can build the courage to step past a Sidratul Muntaha is by actually taking the step past a Sidratul Muntaha. And after he does it the first time and he gets the 50 prayers, and when he's gotten out multiple times, he goes back. He's already done it once, and it makes it different to be able to do it again and again and again. You're going to have to pray in your office once before you do it 50 times. But after you do it first and it builds that courage, then it's going to give you the courage to do it a second time, a third time. They will likely understand it differently because for whatever reason, Ramadan just pops up in people's heads a little differently. Use it as an opportunity to think about it more broadly. Do you see what I mean? And then you'll harness an inner strength that will carry forward past Ramadan. You get past that inward obstacle and then you keep moving forward with it. Does that make sense? But don't see your Islam as a liability. It's an asset. And if you're going to give up your heart for anything, give it up only for Jannah. That's the only thing that it's worth. And none of the rest of this stuff is going to make a difference in the long term. You see? Okay, let's take 2 minutes and turn the persons next to us. What are we taking away from tonight's conversation? And we'll take a pause and make a couple of quick announcements and we'll pray Isha. But go ahead.
Why not? It's the last part of the sermon, so it's basically like, yeah, we're like we'll start going back and forth, lowering the prayers, and then he comes, yeah, and then he comes back now, like, yeah, and then like now he comes back now, and it's like Abu Jahl, right? He comes and it's like it was kind of like they had that conversation where like you kind of ask me over, right? Alright, this is what happened, right? It's kind of like, whoa, like, Prophet Muhammad like, would never lie, right? Like, he has the best character, and yet he has the courage to sit there and say, like, yeah, like somehow Mecca to Jerusalem, like, to heaven. It sounds crazy. So that is like, yeah.
Think about it. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I could just imagine him explaining to people. He said, like, this is what happened.
Are you guys all done down the hall? It's like totally finished.
Yeah.
Oh, how'd it go? Yeah. Good. Are all those people coming down here to pray Isha? They're here already?
Some of them are.
Okay.
Also, I remember, I think it was like 2 years ago, you had to finally get in contact with the nurse for the hospital.
Oh yeah. So one of the immediate projects that she there's a nurse in our community who every year does in Ramadan. She needs volunteers to drop off like suhoor and iftar to patients in hospitals who are sick and their families are like fasting, but they have to be in the hospital with their loved ones. So she needs volunteers for that right away, and that's at a website called Caregiver. Um,
But like, that's
Care, KHAIR,
it's about
giver.com. But if you do me a favor, I'm really behind on a lot of things. I've just been sick a lot. Just email me and I'll add her to the email thread because I told her I would do that, and then she can connect you. They need like I think 2 a day per hospital. Yeah, for Ramadan. And then after that, you can just kind of talk to her. Her name is Shazia about like the stuff you want to do. Yeah.
I forgot exactly.
So that means like every day she needs somebody to drop off.
Yeah. Okay. All right, man. I'll see you, man. Sound good. What are some of the things we're taking away from today? Maybe we can get a couple of people to respond. Nothing about Shawn Mendes, please. Yeah. Go ahead.
I don't even know that guy. I was thinking.
You have his poster in your room.
I'm a loser.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about when we went on the New Mexico retreat and we're talking about the 50 prayers. I don't remember the name, but there was this brother who was like, "Oh, I tried to do the math in terms of how often you would have to pray, and it turns out it's every 20 minutes if you had to pray 50 times a day, which seems like a lot." And then he was like, and then I thought,
what is something that I do every 20 minutes for like a couple of minutes, looking at my phone, right? And like me, as someone who doesn't have a healthy relationship with my phone, like I definitely look at my phone for a couple of minutes every 20 minutes for as long as I'm awake, right? So just thinking about like 50 prayers sounds like a lot. And then thinking about that, it's like actually not that much. So if we could do 50, which technically we could, then like we definitely can do five. It's like actually such a blessing that we get to do five. It's such a gift.
Yeah, and you got to see it that way, right? Like shifting an vantage point, a paradigm shift. Like if you see it as something burdensome or it's a distraction, rather than like it's a mode through which distraction can be resolved, do you know? But knowing it beyond just the mechanics. What's its point? What's its purpose? What do the hadith describe and define it as? And how come I'm not getting out of it what it says like it's supposed to be? And I have those inward conversations as I like move forward. And it's a spiritual journey, do you know? And there's going to be things that like kind of get in the way um, or fluctuate, which are not problems. Do you know what I mean? But as phases of life change, like other things will change accordingly. What else did we talk about? Any other takeaways? Maybe one or two people. Yeah.
Okay, so something that just really like sat with me with is like the fact that you can't people will never know about Islam if you don't tell them anything about it. And so a lot of my friends, like my close friend group, they're almost all of them are of another faith, they're Christian. And so I go and attend their Bible study just to learn more about Christianity. But because I'm a lot in a Christian space, I like listening to them, but I don't like bringing in my own perceptions, like explaining to them what Islam is. So they have all those perceptions of Islam that I'm not trying to correct. And they have those, like ideas of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the things that we do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. And I've always been too scared, like to bring up, like to explain, like us, unless they really do ask, and like I'm forced to explain it, I will explain. But I really understand like what we're talking about today. Like unless you tell them about it, they're gonna have this perception to every Muslim, not just me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's a responsibility to make sure that they are educated when they're talking about our religion.
Yeah, and he's not apologizing for it. Do you know? Like he's just telling it for what it is. Do you know what I'm saying? So somebody's like, "Why you got your foot in the sink?" Because we wash our feet, right? Like half of you don't even wash your hands when you go to the bathroom. Why do you have a problem with me washing my toes? Maybe you need to wash more. Like it's not I'm washing too much, right? But just an understanding, you're dealing with, even if you know it, right? Knowing it is not enough like to address it. You live under whiteness as an ideology. It purposely makes you hate yourself. It makes you think that because you are different, that makes you worse. And you're constantly being compared to what it claims is the primordial state of existence, which is whiteness. And like at the very least, the other end of the spectrum that is rooted in anti-blackness, as much as you innately want to be white, you don't want to be black. Do you know? And like you can't be hard on yourself, but you have to realize like, well, where did the thought process come from? I am like the children of colonization and slavery and imperialism. Do you know? And then you get to a place where like the hyper legalization of religion is like rooted in what exactly? Everybody just keeps talking about fiqh, because if somebody started to talk about things that actually compelled you to go out and do something, you'd have to then say like, well, why aren't you going and doing it? Why are you building like so many masjids and like all this kind of stuff? And why aren't you building shelters and clinics and whatever else is also our responsibility? Do you know? Those things take like a different inward state of thoughtfulness and conviction and courage and like selflessness. Do you see what I mean? You can get confined by anti-black systems that have you perceive certain things. This is why it's not like to sound a certain way. It's to really understand one of the biggest challenges that Islam in America experience is when immigrant Muslims come and they consciously choose to work with white apparatus as opposed to establish black Muslim communities that have been here for so long. Do you know? And you got to do it differently and think about that differently. Do you see what I mean? And then understanding, like, where does the notion come in that makes me feel like emotions are data points? None of them are good or bad. They all have a purpose. We might sometimes think about them simplistically as good or bad, right? But like joy is a good emotion. What if I feel joy at your misery? That's not a good thing. Anger is bad to feel. What if I'm not angered by oppression and injustice? Do you know? How I respond to emotions could be good or bad, but fundamentally, they're data points. They're telling me something about myself. I might not want to hear what it's telling me about myself, but if I'm scared to bring up what Shaitan is going to want me to focus on, right, is the outcome. What our religion is telling us, and just like anything, somebody be like, don't watch pornography. Somebody comes into my office and struggles, and they're not looking for an academic answer. They're trying to figure out how to stop it. We got to figure out, well, why? Where does it come from? Do you see? The same way, like, why am I scared? And if every wakeful moment of every curriculum you've been exposed to, every institution you're a part of has been built to cater to the privilege and to ensure that those who are in power retain power, and they make you feel as if you're special because they give you what you were entitled to in the first place, and then tell you there's something wrong when you don't say thank you for it, like, why wouldn't you hate on yourself? Do you know? And that's where like love is important. It's hard to love fully when you don't like yourself. But you don't dislike yourself because of you. You dislike yourself because they don't want you to like yourself. And then you think you made it because you got a check with a certain amount of zeros and you got a job title that all you had to do was lie to get, or had to pretend like it doesn't add to like inequity and exploitation. Or you just had to not pray a couple of prayers during the day. And whose acceptance are you then really seeking to attain? Why do you want their validation so badly? Do you know? Why? And that's like a big part of the crux of this. Do you see what I'm saying? Right? And I appreciate you bringing up what you said, because likely there's a lot of us in this room who like experience the same thing, but don't know how to articulate those types of things. Do you know? Let's do this. I'm sorry we started late and we're ending a little later. Sabrina asked on the live stream, where did I get this hoodie from? I was in Michigan and they have a store called Yella Detroit. And I was speaking at a Qiyam, and the owner of Yella Detroit, she made this sweatshirt for me. And she said they're going to open a store in Brooklyn called Yella New York. But you can go to Yella Detroit and get like the hoodies. They're all really nice. And I think get them customized and stuff. But if you like this one, that's where we got it from. Huh? You want it? Yeah. I would give it to you, man. I don't think anybody in this room wants me to take this off right now. That would probably end my career. But yeah. But in understanding, secondly, what I was saying before, Ramadan is coming. Allah enable us to reach it. Sign up to volunteer. We're gonna have like some nights 1,000 people a night we're feeding here, and volunteering is like with a sense of responsibility, but it creates an opportunity. But do it so long as you do it balanced. It's not an either or; it's a both and. It shouldn't be an obstacle to your own spiritual growth and your own relationship with Allah. You don't want to always be the person sitting on the outside of the program while people are benefiting from the program. You got to pray and you got to eat and you got to do these things too. It's not an either or, it's a both and. We're going to have a bunch of charities that we're raising funds for this Ramadan. Inshallah, we're going to try to collect money to bring mobile homes to people in Gaza. So not just tents, but actual apparatus as they're rebuilding like homes that have been broken down and destroyed. We have another project that's being supported by the Bill Gates Foundation, who is matching every $3 to $1. We'll be raising money for mothers from Gaza, maternity wards and clinics, hygiene products, single moms who have children. And we're looking to see if we can expand that to other countries as well. But we'll put out more information on that. We're going to raise funds for our domestic violence shelter that has residents now. We built this shelter, alhamdulillah, and there's survivors of abuse who now live in this shelter with children, women, um, and we have to provide them with food and counseling and care, uh, support for local families in need in our own community. We support about 800 families in need through the Zakat Fund of New York City. We're going to raise some money for Sudan relief and for the Ida camp in the West Bank that some of us visited before COVID. Our brother Anas Abu Surur, who some of you might remember, visited us for Jummah some time ago. He was abducted in the early part of the most recent violence in Gaza on his way home from Ramallah to the West Bank. And they kept him from his newborn child and wife for 6 months. But he was released, alhamdulillah. And he's going to visit us during Ramadan as well and share some updates on some things. But since we visited in 2020, every year we've raised funds to help them. The Ida camp is essentially a multi-generational refugee camp of internally displaced Palestinians within their own country. They're kind of barricaded behind a huge wall and limited in their movements in different ways. So our funds provide them with like medicines, foods, like other kinds of things. Allah make it easy for all of them. I'm sharing this with you because last Ramadan we raised about $4.8 million for 6 different charity campaigns from 48,000 unique donors. That's not like one person writing a $2 million check. It's thousands of people giving $10, $100, meaning one of the things that all of you have to commit to doing is that you keep sharing these things. Do you know? I'm going to share them as broadly as I can. But if all of us are doing it, like we should get to places where we're raising that much more people to assist them in their time of need and making sure that they're not forgotten and they're not by themselves. You see what I mean? Um, there's other things that we're trying to do that will put the word out as it comes up. But as many of you know, there's a new space project that we had launched last Ramadan, and we're hoping to get a temporary permit of assembly so we could do iftar there in the last third of Ramadan, get people to see the space and experience it in different ways. And we'll need volunteers to help with that. It's like an entirely separate nonprofit, its own apparatus. So there'll still be things happening here. But just to get that in people's head also. And for that project, this year, we got to raise like $4 or $5 million for carryover costs, renovation, construction. Last year, we raised about 7 million in our first kind of Ramadan campaign on it. We've acquired the space, alhamdulillah. It's a $20 million project. And then year on year, it's really beautiful. And I can't wait for all of you to see it and just kind of experience what that'll be like. And really build something for our community that's our own, that nobody can take from us, and is going to ensure that what so much of us love in this place, generations that come after will be able to experience it, right? So make dua for all of these things, make sure that you're a part of them as best as you can. Tomorrow night, to just get ready for Ramadan, Sheikh Fayaz and I are going to be doing a welcome Ramadan session at 6 o'clock in the room upstairs where we do Jummah. Dinner will happen as well. And then Friday night, we'll do our first Tarawih prayer. And Saturday will be our first day of fasting, inshallah. Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had a few questions. I might not be the only one that has this question. So I went into the Google form to sign up and be a volunteer, but I know that like for the last third, I'm going to be back in California with my family. When you're signing up, are you committing to like every Monday night, or every Tuesday night, or is it?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
Yeah, just fill out how it reads, and then come to what you can. They'll put you in a WhatsApp group,
Okay.
and you'll be
There
fine.
will be like some sort of enablement as well.
Yeah, yeah.
What to do and how to do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then the second question was, what time does Tarawih start? I looked everywhere, I couldn't find a time.
It's gonna be right after Isha comes in, which is like right now like 6 something, close to 7. But then the time is gonna change on March 9th, so it'll go back an hour to like 8 something. Yeah. Okay. People want to put the chairs against the wall. If you haven't prayed Isha, we'll make a Jama'ah for Isha, and then we'll see everyone next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.